I get worried. It's like I'm watching my kid on a skateboard or something when I watch these wrestlers um, just do these crazy dives and landings on ladders. Montez Ford, and I'm not calling him out. Corey Graves did kind of messing up the blockbuster a little bit. Super high risk move. Everybody seemed fine. We got a clean winner, DIY. Were one of the challengers, and hold on here. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. There we go. And then the Street Profits putting up a big battle. I thought they had both teams had believable spots, but Bloodline, Tama Tonga Tongaloa win in the end, and I thought it was one of those matches where it's sort of just there to be a main event on TV and be something unto itself, which was kind of nice, rather than a lot of times main events just turn out to be sort of time filler till an angle. What do you think?
I think a ladder match in and of itself is a stipulation that's engineered to have big moments, which after a long, steady road to kind of rebuild the SmackDown tag division is exactly what the SmackDown roster needed to show off the fruits of its labor. DIY, the Street Profits have both had very, very different paths back to the tag titles. They both have very personal relationships with the Bloodline, no matter what incarnation it is. Tama Tonga and Tongaloa have needed a nice showcase to really get themselves over as a duo rather than just the heaters for Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, who, let's be honest here, really outclasses them in terms of aura, as overused of a word as that is. So, putting these 6 guys, all of whom have had a great build up to this match, in a match where they all got some incredible moments. It really was an incredible main event. It sets up the tag division for some more explosive rivalries in the future. And again, it just continued the trend of, SmackDown Go Home shows really kind of being spillover pay-per-view matches, being incredible showcases of spectacle in their own right. There was a period of time, even as early as this year, where a lot of people were saying SmackDown had become skippable. I think tonight's episode really proved that that's no longer the case.
You mentioned that we get a PLE quality match now on the go home shows leading into the PLEs, and it doesn't have to relate. Like, we didn't get an angle leading to anything. We didn't see Cody other than a video package. They kind of stepped back actually from I would say potentially overexposing the wrestlers who were in the main event. We got a video package on it, but what's smart about it is I led in the kind of opening statement. You got rewarded for tuning in because you got to see a match that didn't feel like it was there purely to be a means to another ends to get you to try to, pay attention to the PLE the next day. But I think that can help viewership. People aren't like, well, the SmackDown before the PLE, it's just an infomercial. I'm going to skip it. And then maybe you forget about watching the PLE because you're not invested in it. So I like the strategy of shorter PLEs, but having a match or two that maybe would be on the PLE instead be on SmackDown or sometimes Raw to promote it. So, yeah, I mean, I think it works. I like it. And frankly, they make so much money from TV now. You don't want to just act like it's an infomercial. The networks don't want that. They're paying money. And now WWE with a straight face can look at them and say, yeah, we've got these events for Peacock, but you're getting a match that's, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That DIY and Street Profits, it's a ladder match, but they're not the biggest names that would be on the PLE. But it's a match that absolutely could have been, and it would have seemed like an attraction.
Absolutely. And, it really is solidifying that a TV main event slot is now comparable to a PLE showcase slot, whereas, a lot of times certain communities of wrestling fans on the internet would use, lack of appearances on a PLE to justify claims that, a wrestler's getting buried or isn't getting showcased, or the front or the back office doesn't really have the faith in them that fans do. But under this new regime, there's a dedication, perhaps outside of WrestleMania, to really keep the PLEs nice and tight, which makes them much more attainable for viewers. And because of that, you're allowing these supposed smaller acts, no disrespect to any of the performers involved, to really become stars of the weekly product in their own right. And it enhances the entire WWE product as a whole, because now the TV shows feel so much more watchable. The PLEs still feel special because they've got their own rivalries. There's no spillover.
Yeah.
It's great for the brand as a whole.
And for a while, under kind of a previous regime, everything was about metrics with WWE Network. So the PLEs, the pay-per-views got longer and longer because they wanted to talk about engagement and minutes and all these stats with the network. And there was this kind of idea that more is better. And now they realize, I think, people have busy lives. They don't need filler. There's a ton of wrestling on TV these days. Just make them tight. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem if they added a sixth match to the lineup in an extra 15, 20 minutes. I wouldn't complain. But if they're going to be a little bit short of that, it's still fine. And, now with the early start time tomorrow for people who are UFC fans, it's not going head to head. And I actually don't know. Maybe you've read somewhere. Is it officially starting early because TKO owns both and they don't want the PLE to compete with UFC pay-per-view later that night? It's logical to me, but I haven't seen that confirmed.
I have not seen an official confirmation, but in terms of just basic vertical integration principle, it just makes all the sense in the world, I could very much see a quick little plug for UFC in between matches on Bad Blood, which only lines TKO's pockets even more. And for viewers who have an entire Saturday to themselves, it keeps the train going, keeps the different revenue streams enhancing each other. It can only mean good things for the bottom line, which I know isn't what the fans should be focusing on
Right.
as a benchmark of quality, but it is good to note.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, we talk about the business side here, but obviously we're a niche show compared to
Of course.
the masses who actually just want to watch for, 2.5, 3 hours, the climax of some top WWE matches. And so we'll be talking about that lineup a little bit as we go here. The Sadler version 3 in the chat brought up a point I was going to bring up anyway. Entertaining main event. This was the first time I felt like the Tongans looked like a legit championship team. They need to continue to do this. Tej, do you think that they looked legit? Do you agree with Sadler V3? And my question is going to kind of focus also on whether Tongaloa stood out like, oh, he doesn't belong here, or did he earn his keep? What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the arrival of Jacob Fatu really kind of put a damper on the audience engagement with Tama Tonga and Tongaloa specifically, because it's really hard to push three guys all in the brutal enforcer kind of role when Jacob Fatu is just so much more dynamic on the mic than either of the Tongans are allowed to be. So for a long time, they just felt like faceless goons filling out the numbers because that's what Solo Sikoa needed for his new incarnation. And for a little while, that made sense when they were really trying to push the fact that this bloodline is not on the same level as the Usos and Roman Reigns as the One Tribal Chief, but that can only really take you so far before you lose investment in a tag team. Letting them really kind of be the powerhouses, dominate this ladder match with no interference, did a lot to really solidify them as proper gatekeepers of the tag division. I truly do buy them as a force in their own right. Tongaloa especially, I mean, we've all seen the jokes, we've all seen what the internet's been focusing on, and as a long time viewer of him in New Japan Pro Wrestling, I've seen what the man can do. He's not a fluke. And, I'm not going to argue that his in-ring work is anywhere near the level of some of the other performers, but I think this ladder match did a great job, playing to his strengths, allowing him to take some crazy bumps. They let him get the big victorious moment, which is going to do a lot to, redeem the bad first impressions.
I thought it was the last time we'd see him. I thought it was like, I'm sorry for interrupting. I mean, he's standing on that ladder, and I know Tama Tonga's, holding the ladder, but it's shaking, and he's on, for people who didn't see it, he's on the very top rung, and then he kind of held onto the cable and trusted the cable to hold him when it's sort of there to hold belt, maybe not a human being. So it'd have been, obviously we didn't want him to fall, but I was like, when I talk about being worried, watching this, I mean, I was not gasping, but like, oh geez, throughout the match. Yeah.
It's an atypical way to get invested in a performer, but it does the job.
Yes.
I want nothing but the best for Tongaloa after tonight.
Sadler version 3 says, I was worried he'd fall too, LOL. Mark Biscetti in the chat says, DIY and Profits took full advantage of the showcase. I'm into both acts again because of this match. Talk about that, the what they've done to try to bring the Street Profits after whatever didn't go the way they wanted with Lashley and a turn attempt and all that. Now they're sort of back to where they were, which it's sort of like, same old, same old. They're talented. They're over to an extent, but they were going to refresh them for a reason. Now they're kind of just back to where they were. And then you have DIY, who they've kind of been treated as like a team that has paid a lot of dues and they're respected, but we know they're at the tail end and we're not going to really introduce them to the audience in a way that feels like we really want you to care about them. Just sort of, they're good workers. They've been around. They deserve your respect, but not, we're going to really put thought into getting them over. But obviously, with both of these teams in a showcase situation like this is where they can show off what they can do the best. So, talk about what you think of where each of those teams are. And do you agree this match can help, or is it more ephemeral? It's fun, but I mean, come on, it's still going to be DIY and the Profits next week. They're still the same teams.
Well, I think, and not to really kind of step aside from kayfabe here, there was a little bit of a real life, chip on your shoulder, something to prove, because both of these teams have felt like squandered potential. DIY, of course, running NXT Black and Gold, they have what it takes to be the quote unquote main characters, and they haven't had a chance to show that. The Street Profits as well were, running the tag division. People were clamoring for solo runs for both performers, and, following their heel turn last year, it really felt like they were going backwards. They weren't getting the showcases they deserved. So seeing them both really kind of show out their journeys to this point, it's been really easy for an audience to get behind them because we want these teams to succeed. We see the potential. We see how incredibly engaging both of them are. So seeing them fight for the titles so desperately, it felt real. It felt something that we could all get behind and root for. Moving forward, I think more so than this match, the build of really allowing these teams to stand alongside, the single stars like Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens against the Bloodline did a lot to solidify. No. They can stand next to the main eventers. They're not just tag guys. They're tag guys who can be at the top of the mountain, who can be alongside one of the hottest baby faces in WWE history. I don't think anyone can, in good faith, look at either team after tonight and say, oh, these are not at the very least upper mid-card talents that in a pinch could run the division.
Yep, well put. All right, let's pause and introduce ourselves. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, October 4th, 2024. I am Wade Keller, host of the show, editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter, the website PWTorch.com, and the host of various podcasts, including these post shows, which we live stream on YouTube and then become available for download on our podcast feed. If you are not subscribing to our podcast feed, might be more convenient, and you're watching us on YouTube, might be more convenient sometimes to use the podcast feed. So go subscribe. Just search Wade Keller on your podcast app and search Wade Keller, and you'll see a red logo pop up. That's our post shows following Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown throughout the week. And then you'll also see a blue logo show pop up. That's our main podcast feed, and that includes our weekly flagship. Also on that feed this week, we ran in 2 parts my nearly 2.5-hour interview with the head of AEW, Tony Khan, from 5 years ago. And if you have not listened to that yet, it's fascinating to hear what he had to say on the eve of the first Dynamite, and think about what he said he wanted to do versus what has happened, both just sort of aesthetically, artistically, in terms of the presentation and on the business side. That's all on the feed. Search Wade Keller. That is not on our YouTube channel. Search Wade Keller to subscribe, or just hit refresh if you've already subscribed but haven't refreshed yet this week. We have a fresh face on the program tonight in the co-host chair. It is Tej Narayanan. How did I do?
Nailed it. Sweet. I'm actually very impressed.
Awesome. I know you said off before the show you got friends who still get it wrong after years of knowing you. So, Tej, welcome. You are the SmackDown feud tracker columnist for the website PWTorch.com. Since you are a new face, tell us a little bit about you, your fandom, and just whatever else you want to share.
Well, thank you so much for the great intro. As Wade said, my name is Tej Narayanan. I'm one of the newer contributors to PWTorch. I write a column called SmackDown Feud Tracker, where, as the name suggests, we recap all the feuds currently running on the Blue brand. If you've tuned out for an episode, 2, 3, or even if you watched years ago and you're trying to tune back in, we give you a nice refresher on everything that's going on SmackDown Weekly. I give my predictions on where I think feuds might go, as well as a few updates on injuries and out of kayfabe moments that might impact SmackDown moving forward. I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. Discovered it in my younger days, as many do, and fell out of it while growing up. I discovered PWTorch, the magazine, a few years later, and having very little exposure to wrestling programming just due to lack of accessibility at the time, PWTorch was how I gained a lot of awareness of the wider wrestling world. I lived in Southern California at the time. I still do. I'm in Los Angeles right now. And because of PWTorch, I gained awareness of my local indies, which included Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. At the time, a lot of the main players in PWG went on to appear at the original All In, which evolved into All Elite Wrestling, or join NXT Black and Gold at the peak of that incarnation of the brand, which revitalized my interest in both promotions and really turned me from a casual fan into a diehard that loved wrestling as a medium, a form of spectacle. I studied filmmaking at the same time, and my understanding of storytelling in a live medium really made me believe that I had something to give back and contribute to the world of wrestling discussion. Got back into contact with Wade and joined the Torch soon after. Here I am. I'm very, very excited to be talking to all of you.
I love it. That's a great story. Would you have been able to watch SmackDown, by the way, if it were still on Fox, or would it have been delayed?
It would have been tough because, I'm from a generation of cord cutters. The very act of watching broadcast television with ads feels like a distant memory. It was something I did as a child, but I grew up in the Netflix generation. It definitely would have been more of a struggle for me.
Yeah. Well, good to have you on. We got a lot more to talk about. We are anticipating, by the way, an on-site correspondent who attended tonight's show in person. So we'll keep an eye out for him. I'm going to just bring up where I'll get messages from Derek. So we'll keep an eye out for him. But I want to ask one or two more quick things about the tag team match, and then I want to get to video callers we've got lined up in the waiting room. But in the chat, somebody asked, let's see, it was Jeff Goonan, who says, why is BFAB with the Profits? She doesn't add to the presentation. Sean Plichta says BFAB has at least looked a little more credible, and she doesn't wrestle, which is great. What do you think of the addition of BFAB to as a kind of a carryover from what they tried to do previously?
I think the very concept of having essentially a valet or a mixed gender addition to a tag team, it feels a little archaic for WWE's presentation right now. I'm not against it. Even if it doesn't add anything explicitly, it's a way to foster more camaraderie between the roster, which, just opens you up for more stories, and just allowing BFAB to exist in the same space as these more established superstars does wonders for, her live show charisma. Little inside joke. But for comments that she's not wrestling, which is great. At the end of the day, no one's calling BFAB a ring general, but any excuse she has to kind of be in close proximity to guys like Tej and Dawkins that have been tearing it up for 6-7 years on WWE television at this point can only make her better, which is what we should all want at the end of the day.
All right, we'll put the second topic to wrap things up on the tag match, as far as what I want to bring up, is just the Profits as potential singles wrestlers. That was talked about for quite a while. I'll throw up a comment from Jared Lynch. Montez has always seemed like a breakout star, but Dawkins has been doing awesome things lately. And Sadler version 3 says, yeah, Dawkins is underrated in my opinion. I don't think he's a main eventer, but he's definitely not a Jannetty. Sean says, I like Dawkins a lot too. So how do you feel about the fact that we might never see, and who knows? I mean, I'm not ruling it out, but we might never see a Montez Ford singles run. And handful of years ago, there was thought maybe he'd be a breakout singles star. And then part two, in the meantime, Dawkins they've gone through little incarnations where they've talked about, hey, Dawkins got himself in good shape, and it seemed like they were almost prepping him to be taken seriously if they did break up the team, but prep people for that while they were a team. And then they just kept them together. And I mean, from a little bit of discussion I've had with some people in WWE, the feeling is Montez isn't quite what they're looking for all around as a single star, and they think the Street Profits together are bigger than the sum of their individual parts still. How do you feel about that?
That's definitely something I agree with. I think an underrated part of the Profits presentation is their camaraderie with each other. I don't know if we've seen them shine on the stick individually as much as I would like to see to really get me confident that either Tej or Dawkins could survive on their own. I don't know if that's because of a lack of capability or just because the opportunities haven't been there for them. That's not for me to say, but I think the potential's there. I do think that all the conversation about Tez being the Shawn Michaels, Dawkins being the Jannetty that were much more prevalent a few years ago, I do think that was just because of the product playing to Tez's strengths a lot more than Dawkins. I think that they were determined to kind of be presented as the powerhouse and the high flyer, and they've softened that distinction a little bit in the past couple of years, which I think has really allowed Dawkins to shine, show off a little more personality.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, let's roll to our video callers next, and we'll keep it on the chat room. By the way, you can email us if that's easier for you and you're watching us live, or if you don't watch us live, but for future shows, you can email us and be part of the show. The email address is wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. Also, a reminder, you can read my reports on SmackDown on Friday nights, but also Raw on Monday nights and Dynamite on Wednesday nights at PWTorch.com. But if you are watching us live on YouTube, be part of the show. Join us in the chat. And also, of course, for everybody, please like the show. Comment below if you're watching us on delay on YouTube, and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have that. You can set alarms, alerts. That'll let you know when we put new content up. So thanks, everybody, for doing that. All right, so let's go. We haven't heard from Heel Mark in a while, so let's bring him on. Mark, good to, I was going to say, hear from you, maybe see you, and your cam is on. Welcome.
How's everybody going? Yeah, I've been going through some stuff, so
I'm glad.
I'm in a better spot now. I'm in a better spot now. So I didn't bring too much to the table today, but I did want to say this. Tej, did I say it right?
Tej.
Dude, as soon
Look
as
at me, I'm so confident I jump in. I'm so confident I jump in.
As soon as you said the name of your article, I was like, oh my gosh, I read that article all the time. But I have to admit, because of my disability, I don't sit down and read it. I skim through it as fast as I can, because reading everything gives me vertigo really bad. So I suffer from MS. So it's I read it as fast as I can before anything hits me. But man, I read your article all the time. So anyway, I really wanted to say, man, there was some Tiffy bloopers, and she called Bailey out by her real name.
Yeah, she's called her Pam,
and I was like, oh,
Bailey.
She called Pam, and in our group, Squared Circle Society, which podcast comes soon, we were really discussing this, and I want to get your view on this too. Because some of us feel that she doesn't have enough development to her, and some of us feel that she's kind of stuck as being the side plate, you know what I mean, to behind Nia. And with having the money in the bank, she should be off on her own. You know what I mean? So I wanted your guys' opinion on that.
So I think she's in a good spot, because I think having her, the fans, clearly, I think, and we'll get Tej's thoughts on this too, but I think they're pretty obviously building her up to turn babyface against Nia Jax. Nia Jax is bullying her and trying to dominate her and just being mean, and that creates sympathy for Tiffany. And so I think there's going to be a big moment when she turns on Nia Jax. So I think they're building up to a really big moment, and Nia Jax is such a disliked heel that when Tiffany turns on her, I think it's a good way to launch her as a babyface. Tej, what do you think?
I'm definitely in the same boat. I think that the Pam slip up. It's a great indicator that, as talented as Tiffany is, she is still very young, very inexperienced in comparison to a lot of players on the main roster. And sticking her with Nia, who, for all the discourse around her, has plenty of experience and knows what she's doing in the ring. It gives her a little bit of a safety net. It gives her someone to bounce off of. It gives her, more ammunition to fuel a babyface turn, because she can, act scared and, act submissive to Nia in a way. I think, in the concept of a mentor-mentee is, nothing new in wrestling. I think it's being used to great effect here. I do agree with you, Mark, my friend, that Tiffy has the chops to be going solo. I think if they really wanted to, they could hotshot her straight to the main event. She could be a thorn in Liv's side, a thorn in Nia's side, a thorn in the side of any champion. But I do think that they're playing the long game with Tiffy, and we'll see her in the main event scene soon enough. I don't think there's any need to rush it, but we're on the journey, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if Mark, if they had put her as her own person right now, I don't know what story they'd be telling, and then they wouldn't be really setting her up to have that big pop when she turns on Nia Jax. So the teases of it, and Nia Jax going, "You better promise me you aren't going to do this." But obviously she's thinking about it, but she's trying to be loyal. But you can tell every week that goes by, every time she says it, that saying, I'm loyal to my queen. There's more doubt in her voice, and they're telling the story, I think, well. They're telling the story well in the sense that it's a good story to tell if you want to build up that big moment where there's a pop when she turns on her. Now, you could argue maybe people will hold it against her that she played along this long, grow spine. Why are you letting her talk to you that way? But Tiffany's new enough and young enough in terms of being a national star that I think people can sort of forgive her for being that way with Nia Jax being such a veteran and such a physical dominant force. As Cole said on commentary tonight, this is easily Nia Jax's best year as a wrestler, the most dominant. Bayley giving her some praise, I guess, for her dominance too. So when Tiffany turns on her, and then she's going to be a babyface, and when Tiffany faces Nia Jax, I think the fans will be fully behind Tiffany. And I mean, signs are good. Her athletically, she's really good. I mean, blocking that sit-out faceplant from Naomi with her hands, and then leaping up and then hitting a drop kick all in a fluid motion. I mean, she's doing things athletically that are dazzling. Like there's wrestlers who stand out when they first show up. AJ Styles was a big part of the show. We'll get to him when he first started working indies, and then in TNA, it's like, okay, he's doing things a lot of wrestlers do, but there's a little something extra on it, and then he's doing things we haven't seen. Evan Bourne, Matt Sydal was one of those people who he did ordinary moves, but there was that little extra juice to him, and it stood out. You can stand out if you're not just doing moves or not just doing complicated moves, but you're doing sequences and basic moves that look better and more dazzling than most people trying to do them or doing things people wouldn't try to do. So she has that going for her, and of course, a distinct look. And I think she's, credible in the ring already. She doesn't just look like some wrestlers who have acrobatic backgrounds look like they're doing acrobatics in the ring. And with her, it looks like she's actually, more often than not, using her gymnastic experience to outmaneuver and punish her opponent, not just try to sneak in a high spot that will dazzle people. Mark, back to you if you can follow up on that or bring up one of your other topics. Oh, Mark, hold on. There we are. Now we're ready for you.
Yeah. Not even gonna lie, I plan on getting the Tiffy Money in the Bank briefcase. Not even lying. Yeah, but the next thing I was going to talk about was the AJ return.
Yeah, good.
Because, oh gosh, man, like one of my all-time faves, dude. Like I actually got into TNA because of AJ. Like everybody was like, "Oh, have you heard of TNA? Have you heard of TNA?" And I didn't know anything of TNA, and then I saw AJ and was like watching what he did and was just amazed, and just started watching TNA only because of AJ, and then got into everybody else. But I like seeing what happened, and I am like, was that kayfabe or was that real? Because it looked real.
Oh, the injury?
Yeah.
I didn't ask. I didn't check. So I'm actually not sure at the moment. I mean, I assume it was a work because they wanted to give a fluke win to Carmelo Hayes, but they didn't want AJ to lose, but they wanted Hayes to advance, and so it makes storyline sense what happened. And visually, there was nothing that looked like it would have injured his leg, even though they replayed in slow mo and said, "I think it was here," and maybe it was here. So I can't rule it out, but it felt storyline to me. But I also watched it thinking, I bet people watching this are going to think Styles really got hurt. And then they did good follow-up with the doctor with his, boots off and being in pain. So I thought they did good follow-up on that also. So, it's probably a storyline. And also, by the way, just, it's his return match. And I thought Corey Graves was really good on commentary saying when wrestlers are gone for a while, you're more likely to make mistakes. It's hard to get your rhythm back. He did a good job. Tej, what do you think?
I mean, AJ Styles, Mark, I'm right there with you. He is and always has been in the GOAT conversation for me. So seeing him, whether it was kayfabe or not, really called attention to the fact that he's been doing this a long time. He's closer to the end than to the beginning, and that he's focused on his legacy. It brings out the waterworks in you when you don't expect it. Seeing AJ Styles kind of hit that legend status, and whether it was a work or not, seeing him, not be as untouchable in the ring as he once was, it does a lot to solidify him as a babyface at this point in his career, if what we saw was a full-on babyface turn. And, Carmelo Hayes, I think, showed out. He stood in the ring against AJ Styles. He didn't look out of place. I think that this match did a lot to set both of them up for the near future. Do I think the injury was a work? I think so, just because of little tells, the amount they focused on it on camera. They don't tend to do that if a shoot injury really does happen. But again, just the fact that it could be either or, it says a lot to how good AJ is at selling. I had nothing else to say. AJ's the GOAT. We love him.
All right, Mark, back to you.
Yeah, my first reaction was like, I'd be down to see Casanova versus AJ. I would still be down for that because I've been watching Mello since he was Christian Casanova and AJ since he was in TNA. So it was like, dude, this match is just gonna be awesome. Give me like this a few times. This would just be amazing.
Mark, since you're touting him, let's bring up Sadler version 3's comment in the chat. This was Mello's best showing on the mic. He spoke confidently and actually got heat. I was thinking that pretty early on in the promo, and I think by the end it was pretty clearly his best mic work on main roster.
Main roster, yeah.
Yeah. Tej, what do you think? I don't know how much you saw of him before main roster, but what do you think of his mic work tonight?
I mean, my first exposure to Carmelo was on NXT, and it was during his first babyface run. I think I started catching up with him right when he turned babyface against, I believe it was Braun Breaker, immediately after losing the title, the NXT title. And he always had this young gun kind of energy to him. He felt like the next generation, very emphatically doing things his way. The birth of the him nickname was, I am not going to stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm going to carve my own mountain. To see that so effectively turned into a heel energy, especially off the back of his incredible series with Andrade, it's a real testament to his growth. He reminds me of a lot of people I know that have a healthy disrespect for an older generation in, service of trying to blaze their own trail, but then it goes a little too far, and they wind up kind of needlessly stomping on people's legacy. And if karma hits them, they get punished for it. And I think we're going to see that with Carmelo soon enough. And my God, will it be cathartic?
And I like the first round draft pick storyline. They haven't hit you over the head with it too hard, where it just feels so contrived. But it definitely was a story with him. Hot prospect, call up from NXT, came up short, and people are wondering, oh, why do you debut him and have him lose right away? And it's like, well, because they're telling a story, and it's kind of like with Tiffany. Why isn't she standing up for herself? Well, be patient. She's going to have, 10, 15 years wrestling probably. We can wait a few months and build up to the moment that she turns. And with Carmelo, I mean, I don't think what they've done with him has defined him down. I think it's more, Tej, what you're saying, it's built up people wanting to see him get beat up. And the job of a heel, more than getting booed, is to get your babyface opponent over. And his character can do that because people are going to pop for babyfaces beating him up because of what Tej said. His character is disrespectful, showing up and thinking, who are all you people? I'm him. I mean, I think it's a really good setup. And obviously they've given him a showcase to show what he can do in the ring so far too. Just enough where fans go, in sort of a meta sense, removing yourself from the storyline, this guy belongs. Mark, back to you.
Yeah, Roddy Piper, Ted DiBiase, like they got the good guys over. You can't have Batman without the Joker. Mm-hmm. Just saying, Mello is doing perfectly fine, and when he gets the U.S. title, the #1 draft pick thing is just gonna just. I can just see the merch that they're gonna do with that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was I've been a DIY fan for a very long time. I like Ciampa since he's been in Milwaukee because Milwaukee right here. So it just seems right now it's like they're kind of using them as almost like a comedy act. Like I know they're funny guys to begin with. Like they did the glorious bombs when NXT, and now they're doing like the glorious RKOs. But it's like they're more than that. Come on, like do something with them. It just seems like all they're using them for is a comedy act
now. Tej.
I mean, I see where you're coming from, but I think it's also a credit to the WWE product right now that they can be believable as a comedy act doing straight comedy segments, but also hold their own in a main event. And I think prior to his heel turn, you saw that a lot with Chad Gable as well. And I don't know, DIY for me was hit or miss for a little while because I saw them right when Ciampa and Gargano came up to the main roster individually. I went back and I really caught up with their legacy after that. But, they really just felt like ordinary guys, but they didn't have like the showiest characters in the world. But I think now they're really trying to use that to their benefit. Like all the comedy segments they do, they just feel like, two dudes, they're wrestlers, they're having fun with it. And it's refreshing to see that little like fan pinch me energy kind of poke through a little bit, because a lot of us wish we were in their shoes. And, I'm sure if I was a pro wrestler, I'd probably try and do something like the Glorious Bomb in my spare time as well. But, again, seeing them show out in a ladder match, do some incredible spots, I think is proof that they are at the very least seen by upper management as more than just a comedy act. So I have faith that one day I'll see my boys with gold around their waist once more.
All right, Mark, good to hear from you again. Thanks for checking in.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, let's go to our next video caller, Dan, or our next audio caller, Dan. Dan, welcome. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind about SmackDown tonight?
Pretty much everything that was already talked about. The show was overall really good. I thought it was more Attitude Era-ish with the dumpster.
Yeah.
The hard B word from Bailey, and then the ladder match. It was like, really wasn't PG-13 era-ish.
Yeah, do you think, Tej, they were trying to establish that the USA Network era is going to be a little bit different? Like, I thought it was noteworthy that Cole and Graves were kind of joking about the dumpster. They haven't cleaned it out. Somebody can get infections, whatever they're doing in the pre-match. And then right as the bell rang, Cole goes, time for joking's over. Somebody can get hurt here. This is a serious match. There's stakes. There's, and then they did that spot at the end, which was amazing with a table leaning over the top of the dumpster. I thought that was athletically, I talk about kind of wincing during the during the ladder match, but the finish to that with Michin, she had to leap just perfectly to not have that really backfire. So it felt like, sometimes we got the holiday theme matches. I think of Anderson and Gallows doing Halloween and Christmas matches, and it's just like eye rolling and please just don't break the tone of things just for a holiday theme. This didn't feel that way. This felt like we added a dumpster. There's some comedy. Obviously, with Chelsea Green, there's going to be comedy. Her reaction to being all covered in gunk, and they had to do their backstage comedy of everyone thinking she smells, and that's fine. I mean, that's sort of part of the WWE viewing experience, and it is what it is. And so, I know there's people sitting at home having just laughing at that stuff. I mean, I get why they do it, but the match itself had a more hardcore execution vibe to it too, which is a credit to Chelsea and Michin. Tej, what do you think?
I mean, I've always never really preferred huge amounts of comedy in my wrestling. Nothing against it, not putting it down. It's just never really been my preferred flavor.
Yeah.
I've loved like the sportier presentations, like emphasis on rankings and win-loss and yada, yada, yada. So it's really interesting to see WWE kind of reintroducing these inherently goofier stipulations, but now there's genuine work rate, in-ring psychology behind them. They don't feel like just a car crash for the sake of a car crash happening, because it was very easy to kind of roll your eyes and say, all right, now we're in the cartoon part of the show, but this had weight to it. There was real violence, there were character moments, and it speaks to a more consistent product overall. It speaks to a more sophisticated product overall, and I love this evolution. And of course, seeing the women's division be allowed to get more hardcore is absolutely incredible. They don't feel neutered down anymore. Michin especially, feels like an absolute hoss just walking through her opponents. Hopefully, moving forward, they can continue capitalizing on this momentum, because they may have just found their next kind of mid-card babyface in waiting, because the crowd was popping for Michin.
Yeah, we got some chat room comments. I'll just add, Dan, to you bringing this topic up. Anthony B just said in the chat, when I first heard dumpster match, I was not interested, but this totally delivered. Sadler version 3 says garbage match was better than I expected. Crowd actually got into it. Brock Benningfield says I love just about everything Green does. And Ashley M says Chelsea Green is the real MVP. Tej, talk a little bit about Chelsea Green. And you talk about the comedy aspect of it. Obviously, that's a big part of her act. What do you think is the best way to utilize her? We talked a lot over the years about like Kurt Angle, and that he could have been a bigger star if he wasn't so good at comedy, that they leaned into him doing comedy so much. Because if he wasn't good at comedy, he had all these other traits that actually were higher tier traits to have, like typical of main eventers, but they just couldn't resist putting him in skits and comedy. And so with Chelsea, some people think, man, she's really funny, and you hate to subtract that stuff from the show, but there's other talents that she has. So yeah, where are you on the way they portray her?
I mean, at the end of the day, comedy is just one tool in a wrestler's arsenal, in my opinion. And credit to Chelsea, it's a tool that not a lot of people can really tap into at the level of sustaining a comedy-based character for as long as Chelsea Green has. And, she's been afforded the opportunities to, similar to Kurt Angle, to show out in ring and prove herself as more than just a joke that, can't actually wrestle. I think Money in the Bank this year comes to mind. She had some incredible daredevil spots that, ordinarily a comedy act might not have been trusted with. I do think that eventually one day she will get, her serious run as, a no-nonsense character. I do think that day will one day come, and when it does, it'll hit even harder than it normally would, because she's been so goofy for so long. And I think Chelsea's gone on record as saying she doesn't think that a title's necessary to maintain a character or to, give more juice to a division. But it speaks a lot to the fact that she's able to like get audiences on her side despite being so over the top in an era where, more human, down to earth characters are really kind of in vogue.
All right, Dan, throwback to you.
Yeah, Chelsea Green is. It's a mix of balance. You just got to have some seriousness in the show versus comedy, and then comedy's subjective too. So like what you might find funny is not funny to others, and that's how I was with Green earlier when she first started, because I was like, where are they going with this? Where's the manager? Where's the manager Karen act? I was just like turned off by that, but now she's gotten better lately.
Yeah, they definitely moved beyond that. Well, I shouldn't say beyond it. They've shifted it enough where I think when you see her, you don't just think, you think she's a wrestler now. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, they again, it came down to, is she good at that? Yeah. Is it sort of a one-note joke? They ran into the ground and there should be more, and she's more talented. Yeah, do more with her, and they have. But you put in good performances, you can rise above being seen as just a comedy figure. I like the chemistry that Piper has too. Brock Benningfield in the chat says Piper knows her part to play as well. Dan, go ahead with something else if you got anything else for us.
The promos, do they practice them in the house shows, or do they just wrestle and that's it?
Thanks, Dan. So they don't do many house shows anymore. So that's kind of part of things. And they typically did not practice promos at house shows. Sometimes they do talking, but house shows historically have been mostly just match. They some practice in front of a mirror. Like we've had creative team members on who talk about the different ways wrestlers work on their promos and develop them. Like, John Cena would show up and say, "What have you got for me? And why are we saying this? And what's the situation? And what do they want to accomplish?" And then he'd say, "Okay, now here's some things I want to do in my voice to tweak it, add to it." And he had final say. He had the clout to do it. But he showed up the day of the show asking more questions than just saying, "Here's what I want to say." But then he would tweak it. Randy Orton just wanted it scripted, word for word. And he goes off in a back hallway and paces back and forth and just practices every word, like, to memorize it. So that's just two examples of top guys and the different practices that they have. And so everybody has different ways that they do it. Yeah, Tej, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, just the quality of the writing has definitely gone up in recent years, and obviously I don't have all the details on if the creative team has significantly changed, but you can definitely hear a lot more of the wrestlers' own voices in their promos now. Babyface promos, even if the characters are kind of similar, they don't feel the same. A Cody Rhodes promo never feels the same as a Kevin Owens promo, which never feels the same as a Seth Rollins promo. And that's only to the credit of to the writing team. It makes each wrestler just feel that much more distinct. And there was a lot of derision met by the fans when the switch to a much more tightly scripted product began, and to see that goodwill being built up is really gratifying.
Yeah. All right, Dan, appreciate the comments. We'll sure hear from you soon. Enjoy your weekend.
All right, you too. Bye.
Yep. All right, let's bring in our next video caller, Kevin Schwartz. Kevin, welcome. Audio only, it looks like. Kevin, welcome. What's on your mind about SmackDown?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Okay. So I can't wait for Tiffany to get that big push. She's almost there. I think they're going to push her. I never liked the bowing down to somebody because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I know it's a storyline to get her ready, but if we do it too much, even though we know wrestling's scripted, how are we supposed to believe in somebody if they do it too much? If you get my point. I don't know how I want to say what I'm trying to say to you.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So the idea up here is they've got their queen gimmick, for better or for worse. And if you're going to have, and Tiffany's been cast as the assistant to Nia Jax, the underling, the one who, whatever. I mean, royalty gimmicks and just in kids' cartoons and Disney movies, whatever. There's people surrounding the queen and the king, and that's Tiffany's role. Again, it might not be your style of wrestling. I'm just saying what WWE's trying to do with it. So Tiffany, if I'm to get kind of inside her character, knows she has to say this or her entire relationship with Nia Jax is going to blow up. And she isn't quite there yet because Nia's a champion. She's the veteran. Tiffany is being subservient to her, literally a subservient, serving her and complimenting her. So that's just the shtick that she's doing, and it fits her character, which is, I'm uncomfortable with this. It doesn't feel right, but I don't feel like I have the confidence to not do what Nia expects of me. So that's where she is. And I don't think she's doing it in such a way that it's so degrading for so long that it feels like people won't forgive her and be excited, as I noted earlier, when she turns. Tej, anything else you want to add to that? And we'll go back to Kevin.
I mean, I think it all stems from a real place, that dynamic between Nia and Tiffany. I think we've all, had bosses that we walk in ready to, take every word they say as gospel. And then as we get more and more advanced in the workplace, we slowly start to realize our bosses are not as, all-knowing as we once thought they were. For any listeners, I am not talking about myself and Wade, I promise.
How about you and your boss? But no one will see this. No one will see this.
No one will see this.
Tej,
It's not being live streamed, is it?
Your current boss won't see it, so you can admit that that's what you're talking about. Anyway.
No. But, I think that they've planted just enough seeds with Tiffany, showing her, her total subservience to her, indignation to just kind of being dressed down unfairly as much as she has, to now you saw some more kind of simmering anger at Nia openly this week. So I do think they're doing just enough to kind of make her feel relatable and not just a wet napkin for Nia Jax. And when that betrayal eventually comes, it is going to hit.
All right, Kevin, back to you.
Jens, we're talking about promos, and I wasn't even going to say nothing until the last caller brought it up. I'm so glad that the promos have come a long way. If you remember back in the day when they used to be in like a little box on the screen.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 or 3 seconds, but they did that because a lot of those guys couldn't do promos. That's why they had managers a lot. They weren't very good at it. Even in the interviews, they would like do the full screen interview, with the WWF board behind them, and some of them were horrible, even though like Ultimate Warrior was horrible, even though he was entertaining. He was entertaining as hell because it would be like, because you have to figure out what the hell is he talking about. but promos have come a really long way, and they're doing them live too, unlike Raw, and I believe SmackDown's live still, but I think they've just come a long way is all I was going to say.
Kevin, you go back quite a ways as a fan. When did you first start watching?
Late 70s, early 80s.
So
my first guy was Magnum TA. It was very sad when he got into that wreck. And back then we didn't have the internet. We had to wait for the news to come out, and wrestling wasn't big then like it is now. Like it wasn't. And like I said last week, my first time here, I wasn't subscribed to any of the newsletters yet. And I don't think there was any at that point. I'm not sure.
Magnum's car accident predated me starting the Torch. So a couple things. One, I think there were promos. I think the glory period of promos was when I first started watching the AWA at kind of the end of their glory years. I mean, Jesse the Body Ventura, Bobby Heenan at his peak with Nick Bockwinkel, Crusher Jerry Blackwell, greatly underrated. I could go on. Trust me.
Yes. Yes.
Those were, I mean, AWA is known as an interview territory, but there were a lot of good interviews. But like World Class Championship Wrestling, their format when they syndicated nationally was very few promos, which was kind of shocking to me as a fan because that was what pulled me in, as the personalities and their talking ability. And they were just about matches, and because Von Erichs weren't good talkers and at all.
They tried.
Actually, David was good, but the rest never came along. And obviously, David died way too young, sadly. And then obviously, Michael Hayes was great. They let him talk. But nevertheless, Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez were good. So in that era, they're Iceman King Parsons did his thing. But my point, largely, instead of going on a rabbit hole of each territory and all that, wrestlers had in that era had to come up with their own persona. They'd ask veterans for help and that kind of thing. And they'd go territory to territory, and their value was, could they talk people into the building? And so they had to develop that. And WWE's crafted this system out of need because they don't have a territory system feeding them develop stars anymore, like in the mid-'80s, as a Netflix documentary covered. Now they have to develop their own talent. And so that's why there's promo classes and why NXT exists, and wrestlers, try to figure things out. Look at all the different versions of Braun Breaker people saw watching NXT. Comes to the main roster, the top tier producers look at him and say, all right, here's where we think we want to go with him based on his body of work. And they lean into that. So to me, I think promos are better now than they have been in other eras, but I don't think we're still at the point where wrestling was in the 70s into the mid 80s, when wrestlers kind of had to produce great promos and they were hired based on whether they could talk people into buying tickets. The second topic is those inside interviews that you talked about in kind of the late 80s, early 90s. They weren't substitutions for promos. It was more just they'd put them on the screen during a ring entrance, and it was a way to get a little extra talking in. But it was also during the time when Vince McMahon's characters are very two-dimensional, and it worked for a while, and then it sort of, people wanted something more, and then we had the downtime in the mid-90s, and it spawned a whole era of different wrestling, the Attitude Era, and what ECW and Paul Heyman led. So those inside interviews didn't really, they were by design a quick soundbite for a wrestler who, oftentimes in their territory years, earlier in their career, were great on the microphone. But Vince McMahon is like, here's your one-dimensional character, two-dimensional, almost overstating it. And here's your one-dimensional character, spout these catchphrases, Brutus the Barber, Dick the Rebel Slater. They just so it was the localized interviews and syndication where you got to see who could really cut promos. So some of the people who were doing bad in-set promos actually were better in a different setting, either in the WWF for the localized promos or when they were in a territory. So it's hard to generalize that they're better now than they were then. It's just the format of the show then with the in-set interviews was just a technique to sort of jazz up ring entrances on the syndicated shows. Tej, anything you want to add to our promo talk here, our interview talk? Tej, do you want to add anything?
The advent of there we go. Little lag right there. All right, am I back?
Yeah,
yeah.
Little distorted.
So I think for me, the advent of weekly television really changed the style of promos because it allowed your top guys to get across different aspects of their character on a week-to-week basis. You could be a badass one week, show vulnerability the next. In preparation for WWE's revival later this year, I've been going back and watching a lot of Saturday Night's Main Events. And, I didn't grow up with those characters. I didn't know too much about them, but it's fascinating for me to see a Hogan promo or a Mr. Perfect promo where they really just had those 90 seconds, 2 minutes with Mean Gene to kind of get the crux of their character across to a prime audience that maybe didn't know too much about them. And because of that, you really kind of got to go all out and show, all the aspects of your character, the intensity, the fear, the vulnerability, the motivation and whatnot. Just being able to, have so many more outlets to
I think we lost him.
Yep, Tej froze up on us. Dan joked someone turned on Netflix, and Tej is home. His internet slowed down. Tej, are you? Oh, now you're sort of back. You're not frozen anymore.
Am I back?
Yep, we caught all but the last 10 seconds, I think. So, but I think we got what you were talking about. Yeah, but the format of longer TV shows. The 2-hour format has changed things a lot. The standing in the middle of the ring promo was not always a staple of weekly wrestling shows. It was squash match, then a backstage, as Kevin, you mentioned, in front of a set. Mean Gene Okerlund holding a microphone, Bob Caudle, whomever. Lance Russell was great in Memphis. Memphis actually was a home of great promos, too, because they had this live Saturday morning format to fill. Jerry Lawler is a great talker, Austin Idol, Bill Dundee. So every territory kind of had their own way of doing promos and leaning on them. And today's WWE is different. I think one thing WWE is doing well, and frankly AEW is doing it too now more, which is how are some of our wrestlers better standing in the middle of the ring, or is it a backstage promo, or do we want to pre-tape and add music or special effects? There's different wrestlers have different strengths when it comes to promos, and I like that it's not a one-size-fit-all approach right now. And obviously, sometimes when someone stands in the middle of the ring and they're not the best talker, it's the Rey Mysterio. It's the joke Rey for 20 years did in-ring promos that never made it to the 90-second mark before someone interrupted him because he wasn't going to carry a segment dynamically. He was an in-ring guy, not a mic guy. So you got to tailor it to everybody, and every era is a little different. Kevin, go ahead. Yep, Kevin.
I was going to say the fun, just as an aside, if you go on YouTube and watch some of the outtakes of some of those old interviews in the backstage area, that's funny as hell. Gene Okerlund is funny as could be. He's trying to be straight, but he's just hilarious. And it's if you go back and watch some of those, the outtakes are just great on that. But thanks for having me on.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. Good to hear from you. All right, let's bring Sean from Tennessee into the program. Sean, welcome. Good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Well, first, I always look, Wade, because a lot of times I get to call on, talk to you a lot, and so I'm like, if there's a coach you've had before, it's like, I'd like to be on, but at the same point, get some new people on, get some other people to kind of talk, have some conversation. But I saw Tej on there. I was like, all right, I gotta get on here. I gotta get a part of this action. Tej, good to have you on, man. We're glad to have you as part of the Torch. I know Wade is definitely happy to have you as part of the Torch for sure. So
he's doing a great job so far.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Tej. Yeah.
Yeah. So just going back to Tiffany really fast. I know I talked about it last week, so I won't harp on it. We've already talked about it a lot, but Tej, I don't know if you didn't or heard me last week, but I didn't like Nia choking her. I wasn't a fan of the visual of it. I know what they're going for. I get it. But they can't go too long with, like you said, they can't go too long with it because again, even though I love Tiffany, I think she's done a great job. The way they're making her feel to me is just like, I just don't like it. And then if she's going to turn face, whenever that is, she has to, like you said the word relatable, and she has to be relatable. I don't want her to lean on the gimmick that she has right now with the Tiffy time, even though it's fine. It's the fans are into her, and I'm into her. I think she's really fun. But I think what hurt tonight too is, this was just leading into the story. I just don't think Naomi should be beating her. I just don't. I'm not a Naomi fan. As far as her in the ring, I thought one of the kicks didn't even do anything. You could see so much light. And they like Naomi. I like her as a person. I just don't like her as a wrestler. And I just think Tiffany should be beating her. I don't care what it is. I don't care how.
No,
I know it. So
no, it's a great point. I was a little surprised at that. I'll say this before I throw it to you, Tej. I think that you've got to give Naomi a win now and then for her to be even the least bit relevant. And the booking sort of truism is, if you're going to be turning, you do a job in your old role as either a face or a heel before you turn, and then it's like a fresh slate. And so I think that's probably what's going into it. One, we need to find excuses to give Naomi a win. She can't lose all the time. And two, since Tiffany's going to be turning babyface, nobody's going to care or remember that she lost to Naomi, but Naomi gets a little boost from it. So I think that's the logic of it here. But you could say it takes a little steam away from her, Tej, if she loses to someone like Naomi, who usually loses.
See, I mean, I'm in a unique spot, I feel like, among the three of us, because I've always been a Naomi fan since her run in TNA as Trinity. I think that...
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that, while her in-ring work hasn't been the strongest since her return, I thought tonight was one of her better showings. And, at the end of the day, it does work with Tiffany's character kind of being in a crossroads. She's clearly flustered. She doesn't want to have to turn on Nia, but, it looks like her hand's being forced. It was right after a very kind of emotional beat for her, teasing a cash in, Nia's looking betrayed. And then right after that, the match starts. I definitely felt like, there was an intention to kind of make the loss as believable as possible. And, for as green as she is, she held her own against Naomi, who, commentary was talking up as being this well-traveled veteran who is been around the block and been around wrestling for a really long time. So I definitely agree with you, Sean. I don't think that someone with Tiffany's in-ring acumen and physicality should be losing to Naomi, but I think if they were dedicated to doing this, they made it as believable as they possibly could.
Yeah, and I want to say about Naomi too, the one thing I don't like about her in the ring is just how slow she is. It just feels so slow and so just, I don't know. It's just something about it just doesn't do it for me. It was one of the better matches she's had, and Tiffany made it look better with some of the stuff she was doing. But I just, like I said, it played into the story, and that's why ultimately I can live with it because of that. But it did hurt me watching it. It really did. One thing I wanted to say about the tag team ladder match.
Sean,
yeah,
before you go on, let me bring in a chat room comment. Jared Lynch says, Naomi is a former world champion and a veteran. Losing to her doesn't hurt Tiffany. Her head also wasn't in the match due to the angle right before. So, WWE thinks about all that in the context. And Brock Benningfield adds, all eyes are on Tiffy. Like Wade said, no one will remember this after she turns on Nia. Yes. Nobody is a figure of speech, but not meant to be taken literally. It's a way to say most people won't. Yes, not all people. No, I'm a stickler for stuff like that, so I can't. I'm just giving you a hard time, Sean. But go ahead.
So so going to the tag team ladder match, the one thing it was a car crash in a fun way. Everybody looked good in the match as far as what they did. I thought it was all fun, but one thing I don't like, and I'm with Wade, I'm a stickler for this stuff too. When DIY is doing all the stuff outside the ring and everybody's down, guys, go for the titles. Like, don't stand there and want to do more damage. Like, they're all down. Like, go get the ladder and go get the freaking titles. It's sorry that nobody cares. Nobody's going to care about that, but I do watching it. It's like you have everybody down. You're all like looking at the crowd and like, go get on the flipping ladder get your titles and be all happy, enjoy, and then celebrate with the fans.
Tej, what do you think about the execution of ladder match and the idea of not seizing the opportunity, especially when it's that, something big at stake?
I mean, Sean, I'm with you 100% of the way, my friend. I think that the closest I ever come to being taken out of a match is very clearly when, someone's just staring dramatically up at a title instead of taking a ladder and going up to get it. But, then I remember, they're athletes performing in front of a crowd of 10,000 people. If I were them, I'd want to catch my breath every now and then and, just try and gather my surroundings. I definitely understand where you're coming from, but I don't know. It feels like it comes with the territory of pro wrestling a little bit. And I'm curious to see, Wade, what do you think? Because you've seen the trends of like pausing and showing off for the audience more than I have over the years.
He's got to be with me. He's a stickler for it. He's got to be with me. No, I'm just playing.
Yeah, well, Dan points out, and this actually draws more attention to it than what we're talking about. The worst is a wrestler going up really slow, and the other guy's taking forever to knock him down. Yes. Yeah, don't do. I'd rather have a wrestler lose his mind by playing to the crowd or being cocky, especially a heel. Makes babyface look bad. I'm not ever really in favor of that. Then the slow crawl up, like I've never climbed a ladder before, and I don't even know how. And does my foot go here? Do I do right, left, or is it right, left, right? Like, come on. Like, you're an athlete. So that's the dumbest. I use the term rules of engagement sometimes. I don't know if it's a perfect way to describe it, but there's sort of things that are baked into what wrestling fans accept and don't accept. You whip someone to the ropes, they bounce off. So in this, I'll go down this little rabbit hole. Like, I talk about breaking up 2 counts in tag matches, the save. And so often it just devolved over years from a wrestler running in the ring and knocking the opponent off his partner, so the pin clearly wasn't happening. America's partner lifted his shoulder, to then people just running in and just like hitting someone on the back, and the ref just stopped his count. It's like, well, just just count to 3, and then you tell the wrestler that was bad, you shouldn't have done that, or that wasn't a very effective save, get better. But instead, the ref just stops his count. Why? There's still a pin happening. That the rule wasn't if you pat your opponent on the back, the pin stops. That was not the origin of the rule, but people got lazy. Same thing with whipping into the ropes. If you go way back to when it was first done, old footage, like wrestlers are putting all their force into whipping people into the ropes. And it's the type of thing I look for in a wrestler, because to me, that's indicative of them thinking about, why do I do things, not I just do it. And if you add that hard whip, it's one of the things people praise Chris Jericho, but go watch his matches. He's of the top workers and top guys, he was the softest, laziest guy when it came to whipping people into the ropes. He just sort of half-heartedly pat him on the back. It was kind of a lucha thing. And it looks awful. And it jumps out to me, and it takes me out of his matches. And he's not alone, but he's a big star who was heavily praised, and it was a weakness in his. It's not just, low card people to do that. So to me, I think you should always be rethinking, how was this originally done, and is there a way we can make it more real? And that should apply to ladder matches too. You watch a match back, and producers, whoever, and the wrestlers themselves, and they go, okay, here's a couple things we want to, the next time we do a ladder match with you guys or others, let's tweak this so it doesn't look fake, because you can eventually just lose sight of the fact that the goal is to keep people immersed in it by making it as real as possible. And that goes to saves in a tag match. Knock that person off with all your force. Get in the way of the referee so they can't make the count without hitting them enough that you get DQ'd. Whip people hard in the ropes. Put energy behind it. It's when you get whipped into the ropes, hit the ropes hard. If you get ripped into the turnbuckle, you go back to the 80s when guys got whipped into the turnbuckle, they hit the turnbuckle so hard the ring shook. Now people sort of soft land in the corner waiting to set up the next spot. So I just think wrestling's better when people care about the straighten your tie stuff in the ring, the details. It adds up to a better experience. And a ladder match is one of those areas where there's a certain rules of engagement fans get conditioned to, and it doesn't stand out, but it's better and free. It doesn't hurt your bump card to just not, stall before going for the win. Set up the match where that isn't something that is even an opportunity to do. Always be running to climb the ladder. That sense of urgency makes the outcome seem more important. And then it becomes less of a performance in a show and more, I'm immersed in something that these wrestlers want to badly win because the stakes are high. But when you're just showboating, and all you're like, oh, that's right, this is a show. They don't really care about winning because it's a predetermined outcome. Don't play into that. Tej, anything you want to add to that? You threw to me, but anything else?
Only that I completely agree. I've seen, several independent shows where, even baby faces will literally just stop mid step and just pause for the audience. And as theatrical and as fun as it is, it really does kind of break the immersion. And it is something that hopefully I think we'll see trending back to a more grounded, realistic direction, because it is an important part of wrestling, even in a post kayfabe world, as some call it, to really buy that these people are, fighting each other and real physics still apply.
Post kayfabe, it's weird that people use that as an excuse for making things look more fake and less immersive in a needlessly sloppy way. Like, who cares if people think they're watching a documentary or a movie? You want to immerse them in the story. So, the idea of, well, everyone knows it's fake and everybody knows the game and all wrestlers talk openly about it in their books. So then we're not going to try to make it look real when the match is happening. That's crazy talk. Like, that makes no sense. Just because people, that's actually, I would flip that around and say, in a post kayfabe world, that's why you should be have even more attention to detail. Because when people thought it was real, if something looks sloppy, they're like, well, that's not fake. They just think, well, that wrestler screwed up or isn't concentrating, because they think it's real. So of course he's trying to win. He just took his eye off the ball. But when people know what it is and you just throw it in their face, this is just a performance. We're just going through the motions to, quote, entertain you. There's still that moment that John Cena stood in the middle of the ring on Raw and said, I hope we entertained you tonight. And I thought that was a pivotal moment in wrestling, because it was the first time it probably wasn't the first time, but it was the most prominent time a big star stood on a big stage and said, and broke from the realm of there's a camera pointed at the ring because these are athletes fighting for a prize that matters. And instead it turned into, we're pretending to fight to entertain you, and I hope we accomplish that. And it's one of the things that I just, from John Cena standpoint, I think has been one of the weaknesses in his approach to things, is he's been a little too, flippant's not even the word. I just don't think it crosses his mind that you should never let the fans know your goal is to entertain you. That just comes with the territory if you're doing your job. The most entertaining thing you can do is never act like you're trying to entertain the fans, but instead be focused on trying to win your matches. Sean, back to you.
Yeah, and that's what was hard, was knowing it was DIY that was doing it and not, Tongalo and Kamatonga. Because them, it's like, yeah, I get it. I've been saying this about Bayley for a while too, but that was one of the best promos she's done in a while. She built me into that match, got me more excited about. Do I think she's going to win the title? No, but she got me more invested in her, and I hope this is the start of a new direction with Bayley, because we've said for a while, and she's just felt so cold. She was doing good stuff as a heel, and now as a face, I was excited about it, but it's been very lethargic. But this promo hopefully will get her. What did you think about the promo? Did you like it? I thought it was very intense in a good way.
Tej.
I think, they've solidified that post Damage Control, Bayley just isn't as believable as an underdog anymore. She spent so long kind of like hissing at her opponents and really kind of playing up an alpha, like I'm better than you kind of role, that for her title reign post WrestleMania, when she went back to the whole smiling, happy to be here babyface, it just rang as a little inauthentic. And even in the build to SummerSlam this year, the first Bayley Nia match, they tried to kind of force a little bit more of that underdog role by bringing up, oh, Nia, you injured me way back in 2017. This is me getting retribution. And the fans just weren't into it because it didn't feel authentic. It felt contrived. So letting Bayley, be the aggressor, be a little more ruthless on the mic while still unequivocally being a babyface, I think it's let her be in a space where she's clearly more comfortable in. And it just feels more real to her in an age where character continuity matters a lot more. Just people aren't going to forget however long she was in Damage Control and just being an awful person, so it doesn't really make sense to go back to the hugger style smiley kind of babyface,
I mean, it's not the most important thing, but she made me reset the bitch meter, so that made me a little
I
upset.
know.
And she said it like she was saying the most original thing ever.
Yeah.
You know, a stupid bit. It's just like, so that was, Sean's face says it all. No, what put Tej? Sean, anything else you want to bring up?
Yeah, a few quick things. Going back to what you said about the dumpster match, like Chelsea with the attire, with the green waste management. Oh God, that was so funny. I was even cracking up on that. I didn't anticipate what she was going to wear. I just thought she was going to come out in the ring with whatever, and then I saw that, and I just popped. I thought it was great.
Yeah,
So
she's
fun.
all in. She's all in on her gimmick.
Yeah.
There's no wink into the audience. You buy,
No.
you know. By the way, this is just a small thing. I talk about, like, I can buy that Chelsea is like her the way she is all the time. That, like, you know, at family gatherings, whatever. Like, she's just and you know, you get amped up for TV. You can imagine somebody getting a little more amped up, but I can see her that kind of largely being who she is. I don't believe Bianca Belair talks like that in any other part of her life other than when the camera's on her. And it's what holds her back. I don't get why everything is so affected and gimmicky. You can get into that when you're like hyped up. And I'm not gonna say there's not a place for it in the right context, but when it jumps out to me more, not when she's in the ring cutting a promo where it's a performance, I'm gonna trash talk my opponent, but when she's just hanging out backstage and Bayley walks up to her and it's still the same thing, it doesn't feel authentic. And I think it's holding her back from being, you know, talked about Montez Ford and Dawkins and expectations for them earlier. I kind of feel like she's in a spot where it's like, yeah, you know, it's Bianca, but she's not the future anymore. And if she just, the way she is on promos and when you see her when she's not, quote, in character, it's so much better. It's so much more relatable and I think marketable. And I don't know why, but it's one of those things where she just always is in a mode that doesn't feel authentic and sustainable. And therefore I don't feel as connected to her. It feels like just sort of putting on a show, like somebody pretending to be a wrestler would act as opposed to a real person in this era. Tej, what do you think on that?
I think, you know, with people like Bianca, and I'm starting to feel this way about Jade Cargill as well, you know, I've met people that do act like them, but only in fits and spurts, you know, they feel on and they're going at 100%, but they also have calmer moments that offset that, make them feel well-rounded. For Bianca and Jade specifically, they always feel like they're going at 100%, even when, you know, the vibe of the segment is supposed to be a little more casual and laid back. I can't remember the last time, outside of a few segments this year, where they're really playing up Bianca's resentment. It's Bayley being immediately forgiven following her following her babyface turn, where Bianca's ever really felt calm and grounded. And I'm not one of the people arguing that she needs to turn heel immediately to freshen up her character. I just think she needs to showcase that she can get a little bit more down to earth when the situation calls for it.
Yep. All right, Sean, anything else you want to bring up?
Yeah, so going back to the Chelsea, it was kind of leaning me into what you said about Meechin earlier. Is I've always been a fan of Mia Yim for a long time. I think Mia Yim is very talented in all phases of the game. I think even her mic skills aren't bad for the limited time she's had. I think she's been good. I think now that she's had this many wins, I think you could put her. I mean, I know she lost. I mean, she held her own with Nia, in my opinion. I think you could put her in a main event and she would feel credible to me that she could win the title. When she win it, I don't know. It depends on what story you're telling. They could do some really good things with Meechin, and I think they have to, like you said, I think Tej, I think you brought it up. I think they need to go with it now. She's hot. The fans are actually into her right now. Go with it. Wade, do you think that's possible that they can do something big? Because I think they can. I think there's something they can do with Mia right now. I really do.
She's been around a long time as just sort of that mid-carder. And, but no, I mean, she's definitely better lately. I don't know if this is, I'm thinking, like, is this kind of her peak? Just being competitive at a top level on SmackDown in a big match, but it is more of a gatekeeper transitional role. And some of it just has to do with, what's the hook for fans to be invested in her? What's her persona and what's her journey? And so I'm not 100% sure. Tej, what do you think? Like, do you agree with me that, like, they're for so long she just wasn't featured. And now when you try to do it, even if she delivers, there's the baggage of just kind of start and stop with her in the past.
I mean, it does feel like she's hit the apex of her skills in her recent run. She's hitting on all cylinders, but that sense of, main event superstar has just never really followed her around for one reason or another. However, I don't know if that's because she doesn't have that in her, or she genuinely just hasn't been given a mic and an empty platform to. Yeah, exactly. Right. I can't remember the last time I really heard Mia Yim in a ring alone addressing the audience. And, for make or break, that's when you really start to see a wrestler laid bare, vulnerable, and you really can get to see them shine as, a main event prospect. Do I think that Mia Yim has that in her? I don't know, because pairing her with the OC for as long as they did, I don't think did her any favors, because her particular brand of swag didn't match AJ Styles that much. I think that, her recent work is just like a babyface hoss that walks through her opponents has really done a lot to rehab her image. I think that if WWE plays their cards right, and gets behind her, she could have a role as a transitional champion. But it would take a lot of investment that, given how crowded the field is, I don't know if they're ready to put behind Mia Yim.
Yeah, I think that's good. Sadler version 3 says Mia Yim feels like Natty to me, solid veteran who can put on good matches, but not a top champion.
Yes, I disagree. I think she's way better than Natty. I disagree. No offense to Natty. That's unfair. She's never had a chance to be that kind of person. You can build her up to SmackDown. Other than Tiffany, there's not a lot of other people you can build up. Build her up to do something. Like on Raw, it's the same thing. You have Rhea. She's going to win the title. You guys can even talk about this, going into tomorrow. But if she wins the title, who is there for her to work with other than Liv? No one. They've built no one up. Zoe just lost to Natty, who, again, I like Natty, but she's over the hump at this point. Zoe should not be losing to her. Shayna was ruined. Other people have been ruined, and they haven't built anyone up. You can build her up. It's not like she's lost every match for years. I mean, she's won a lot of matches. She can do it. Just tell a good story. Invest you in her, and she can do something. Sorry, that's just my thought.
No, I like the passion. I mean, it's not crazy sounding. I just think it's an uphill battle. But if they decide to do it, I mean, they can try and see if it catches on. Brock Benningfield in the chat says, I say she can be a challenger for a title, but come up short. I don't think she's going to be a PLE challenger in a major match or major feud. I think we're going to get NXT call-ups before we see her in a sustained top level that you're advocating for, Sean. For better or for worse. Anthony B says, I'm sorry, but NXT has a better women's division than all other brands. And Sadler version 3 agrees. Yeah, NXT has the best women's division. What that means is when you're looking for opponents for any champion, on the main roster, when you're looking for someone fresh, you're just a call up away from having a fresh opponent, and NXT is, pretty well stocked.
Yeah,
Sean,
oh,
good. Yeah.
Yeah, because WWE just hurt a lot of the talents they had. They have a lot of talent. They just didn't do anything with the talent they had. Now, some of it could be fair. Their mic skills might not have been the best, or there might have been like little reasons why they didn't do it. But with Shayna, there was no reason why she shouldn't have been a big time star. They just ruined it. Vince, it was all Vince's fault at that point because he ruined her with the stupid fighting.
Honestly, she got started to get a push, and then we had the pandemic, and her gimmick just doesn't work in an empty arena. I mean, it's just, I think that really derailed things. I think if she had, crowds, there was all kinds of things wrestlers were doing to make more noise and be more active. And when they didn't have the crowd, they had to actually wrestle differently, and they started talking to each other about how to do it. And it just was bad timing for her. But Sean, anything else quick? We've got our on-site correspondent standing by.
Oh, good. I want to hear it because I wanted to be in Nashville, so I'm glad somebody was there to talk about it. But I'm excited. Zach Barber, I'm calling you out. I'm excited to hear your podcast with Greg. I know they did the AEW podcast. So I'm excited to go back and listen to that. And I'm excited for Bad Blood. It's going to be a fun show. So, Tej, good to meet you, man. Good to be on here with you guys, as always.
Thanks, Sean.
Pleasure, man.
By the way, Mike Myers, years ago, co-hosted with me on a regular basis, I think usually after SmackDown. He is back in the podcast game with Javier Machado on acknowledging WWE. It took arm twisting, not to get too behind the scenes, to get Mike to commit to some podcasts again. I don't think it's going to be every week, but acknowledging WWE back. Kevin Duncan had to step away for work duties, and Javier taking over. And the plan is to have a rotation of some co-hosts on that show. Taj, maybe we'll talk. But yes, exactly. So, but Mike Myers and Javier together on acknowledging WWE. That is a PWTorch daily cast. Search PWTorch on your podcast app to subscribe. Tons of good shows in that lineup. Wrestling Coast to Coast with Chris Maitland and Justin McClellan talking indie wrestling. All Elite Conversation Club with a substitute co-host this week, Zach Barber. That's going to be fun. The 90s Past Cast with Patrick Moynihan and Alex McDonald. And then there's the old logo for the acknowledging WWE, and of course the PWT Talks NXT crew. That graphic's old too. Bruce Hazelwood has stepped away from there. So anyway, search PWTorch in your podcast app and subscribe to the PWTorch daily cast lineup, a different show each day of the week, a real good variety. And even if you're not into every show, there'll be enough there where it's worth subscribing, and it is free. As a VIP member, though, you get the ad-free versions of those shows. So go VIP to take advantage of that. All right, let's bring on our on-site correspondent. Derek Zoo is with us. Derek, welcome.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good to talk to you. Thanks for taking time to talk to us after tonight's event.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I know there's some stuff they did before and after SmackDown. Should we just start with that, and then we'll get into the TV show stuff?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the dark match was Baron Corbin and Apollo Crews beating Angel and Berto. It was a good match.
So that's why they were there.
Yeah. It was crazy to see Baron Corbin get the response that it got.
What was the response?
Just elation from the audience. It's just weird to see after so long, for so many people, hating him for so long. It's great to see that the audience finally respects the guy. So it was really neat to see.
Yeah, cool.
And then after that, they had I guess the semifinal WWE Speed match between Candice LeRae and Kairi Sane, and Candice LeRae won that. It was like a 3-minute match. She won in about 2:32.
All right.
And then after the show was over with, Candice is now the first WWE Women's Speed Champion. She beat Io Sky.
Wow.
And that was pretty cool. Indy kind of got involved a little bit, but I mean, really, Candice reversed the moon, or Io went up for the moonsault. Candice got her legs up, hit her with her move, and it was over. Johnny came out to help celebrate for a little bit, so that was fun. And
I mean, it's not a big deal, the Speed Championship, but I'm a little surprised they put Candice over. But it gives her a bragging point, and a chance to have just quick matches and stuff. Tej, what do you think about that news?
I mean, it definitely is surprising, especially given EO's status in the company relative to Candice. But it definitely feels like the Speed Championship has been, suited to performers of a certain style. That, especially in the case of the first men's Speed Champion, Ricochet was, more reminiscent of like an indie kind of high spot, super, super quick style. And that is what Candice LeRae perfected before joining WWE. So on a certain level, it makes sense. It gives Candice more excuses to get over with live crowds, which is always a good thing, given, her lack of representation on programming recently. All in all, I think it's a good choice.
Cool. Excellent. So, Derek, anything else off TV?
Yeah, we had a few dark matches. Sheamus beat Ludwig Kaiser, and then Liv Morgan beat Lia Valkyria. And then at the very last match of the night was Cody beating Theory. Sorry, Austin Theory. Gosh.
What did anything stand out in terms of these are a lot of these wrestlers are people who are not in the main show rotation right now. Besides Baron Corbin, did anyone else get a response that suggested maybe fans are into him and they should get a more prominent role?
I mean, Sheamus got a really good response, but that's Sheamus. And of course, he's lived here now for like the last 6 or 7 years here in Nashville. So he's after his match was over with, he had the big rah-rah hometown speech. Yeah. Which was fun. But besides that, it really wasn't. The audience was pretty receptive to Candice. But outside of that, it was pretty much what you expect. I will say the craziest part to me was is they announced that Cody was going to be the very last match about halfway through the show. And I would say probably 95% of the people that were there stayed. And normally for dark matches, people leave, by the droves. I'm sure you guys have seen that before. And everyone was there. Everyone hung out until he said goodnight and started making his rounds, around the ringside.
So what did he do? Talk about what he did.
Yeah, so obviously he won the match, and then he talked to the fans, told them he was excited about Bad Blood. He talked about his cousin, who's the timekeeper, and he talked about his nephew was in attendance and asked them if they would help him fight the bloodline. And of course, they both were very, very, very hesitant to say yes to that. And then he just thanked the fans. He gave away one of his weight belts to a child with special needs, and that was a really heartwarming moment. And then said that the next time WWE comes to Nashville, he plans to still be WWE champion, and it's the honor of his lifetime to be WWE champion. And drive safe and have a good night.
Who did he wrestle? Or I don't remember you saying. Maybe
I'm sorry. Yeah, Austin Theory.
Oh, okay. How'd it go? How'd the crowd react? I mean, they were into Cody, and
they were into Cody.
Yeah.
Match wasn't too long. Maybe 7 or 8 minutes. Obviously the crowd loved Cody. Crowd was into Theory, and Theory was having fun with the front rows. At one point, Waller had, I think, Theory's phone, and they were doing the Instagram live, and Cody dove out of the ring, grabbed the phone, and then ran around the ringside area with the phone. Just a lot of fun house show type of stuff that you would see and that type of thing. But the crowd loved it. Cody by far was the most popular person of the night.
That's saying something that late in the night, that he can get that kind of response.
It reminded me of those old shows where, like, the Superstar shows where they would tape back to back to back to back to back, and then Hogan would come out and people would stay for that. Like that. That's kind of where I remember. That's kind of what it reminded me of.
So we get to SmackDown proper, the live TV show. They open with AJ Styles, who's back. And AJ said in the promo that, maybe you guys aren't going to forgive me for some things that I had been saying or that I'd done, and the fake retirement. Crowd seemed into him. It seemed like his stature overall and his career overrode the storyline from earlier this summer. Talk about the reaction for him and how it compared to other actual baby faces on the show, or established baby faces.
Yeah, he, probably one of the top 3 most over acts in the entire night. Obviously AJ has a lot of history in Nashville with TNA, and they loved him, and it seemed like he had done nothing wrong over the last 6 months. Everyone was just excited to see him back and excited to have him back on TV. So it was, I don't know what direction the character's going, but he was a total babyface tonight in Nashville.
I'd be curious, Tej, do you think that fans in Nashville would know AJ's history there? Because the announcers talked about it. He got a big reaction. I'm curious if part of the reaction for him is just kind of bellwether fans who know he has a history there reacting, TNA fans or people who know he has such a history there. Or do you think today's WWE audience, 11,000 plus standing SmackDown, a tiny fraction know that Nashville is a special place for AJ?
I mean, it's hard to say because with the advent of other promotions that, are much more loving towards like the history of wrestling than WWE, which really kind of prefers to ground their audience in the here and now, the odds of a WWE audience really knowing AJ's extensive history are a bit slimmer. However, Nashville crowds, in my opinion, have always leaned towards, lifelong wrestling fanatics. And the other Nashville show that really comes to mind this year for me was AEW's Blood and Guts, which again catered to a much more hardcore crowd. So if I was a betting man, I would believe that, they knew AJ at least had a passing history of Nashville. He was very much Nashville's favorite son tonight, combined with the fact that they brought out, Nashville like music legends to kind of be there with him. It felt like they were really kind of engineering a hometown crowd to cheer for this guy and kickstart a turn. It did not feel by accident that they, that he got as loud of a cheer as he did.
So I'll kick it to Derek for his thoughts on that. The announcers, by the way, Derek, did talk about AJ's history. They said he debuted on an NWA anniversary show in the year 2000 and mentioned the X title and the NWA title and TNA. So on TV, they did acknowledge it, but the fans in the building didn't know that. I assume they did nothing special, Derek, for AJ in terms of priming people. So what's your impression of that Nashville current day WWE 10,000 plus fan base and their knowledge of AJ's history in that town?
So I was on the floor level, right by the entrance ramp, and I doubt that it got picked up because it was just a small selection of people. But there was a TNA chant during his promo when he said, like, I've got a lot of history in Nashville. Like, a bunch of people in my section were trying to get a TNA chant started. So I could imagine that there are those like diehard fans that have been around for 20 to 25 years. I mean, honestly, Wade, like I'll be 39 on Monday, and if I tell anybody in Nashville that I'm a wrestling fan, the first person they ask me about is Tojo Yamamoto. So like people
Wow.
know the wrestling history.
I love it.
Here in Tennessee. So I wouldn't be surprised if the parents of the children that are coming to these shows know what TNA was and how significant that AJ was in the early days of it.
That's cool. Yeah. So, Tej, do you want to ask a question of Derek?
Yeah, Derek. So the one thing that really kind of stands out to me is Theory being put in the main kind of singles match of the dark match sequence, right? That definitely feels like to me he's being primed for potentially a singles run in the future. Maybe we finally kickstart that story. Did you notice Theory getting any kind of babyface fire? Did he get a few chances to play to the crowd? Anything that would signify, a potential turn coming or a solo run?
There definitely wasn't any kind of babyface vibes from him in this. Grayson Waller came out with him, and they were definitely trying to be the bad guys to the heroic babyface and Cody. But I kind of felt the same way that you did. It feels like that if he's in this main event slot, like the company trusts him enough to know that he's going to give Cody a good match and that he's got what it takes to be in that spot. He was having a lot of fun healing on the crowd. He was talking to the first 4 or 5 rows through Cody's entrance, and anytime he got the upper hand, he'd be like, "Well, who sucks now?" And just really, really playing into that role. But I think that I do really kind of feel like that's coming down the pike. Like I feel like that the split between he and Waller is going to happen, and he's going to turn into a pretty big, baby, like we've all heard that they've been wanting for the last several years.
Yeah. How about the dumpster match and how the crowd reacted to it? How did Chelsea Green come across in person? When and Meechin as her opponent, they rolled the dumpster out. Was there a buzz in the crowd? Was the crowd into it? They went 10 minutes and had a spectacular spot at the end that got a holy shit chant. Talk about that in person, Derek.
Yeah, it was great. Chelsea is a star, and she came across big time like that. Meechin got a good reaction from the audience, especially at the end with the bigger spots and stuff. But you could tell that the crowd loved to hate Chelsea, and it was funny. Meechin got the table, and then Chelsea went to set the table up, and the crowd came alive, and then she threw the table away and was like, "You don't deserve a table," and they just booed her out of the building. So it was just a lot of really fun stuff there. And then, of course, the table bump at the end of it, we all knew it was coming, but it was still, it was crazy to see. And I give respect to both those ladies for going through with that.
Did the crowd seem to react to it like it was a comedy match to haha at, or kind of a hardcore brawl that pulled them in because it was hard hitting?
Yeah, definitely the hardcore brawl. I was afraid at first that it was going to play like a comedy match. Especially because Chelsea is that's one of her strengths to me is comedy. But from the get-go, the fans were into it. They wanted to see some hard-hitting action and some plunder, and they were with it right till the very end. Piper Niven got a lot of boos for coming in and trying to interfere, and the audience was with it. I was really impressed with how with how into the match that the audience was.
Then Nia Jax, Tiffany, Bailey, talk about their interactions and if it overstayed its welcome, or if Nia Jax was mega over as a heel, or if people were, heavily rooting for Tiffany to turn on her. And did Bailey come across as a sort of a legacy star in the women's division? Just talk about the dynamic there and the vibe in the building for each of those three.
The audience was definitely in favor of Tiffany cashing in right then and there, which, I mean, obviously, every town wants to see Tiffany cash in.
All right. You want to be part of history.
Exactly. But you can tell that it feels like every week that's building more and more and more. So when the pack comes, it's going to be great. Nia is definitely a big time heel, and she feels like a legitimate big time heel. And Bailey's great. I do think that they're missing that like dynamic baby face women's wrestler over on SmackDown. With Bianca being in the tag team title picture right now, they need somebody. Bailey's great, but I don't know if she's that person anymore.
Yep. And then the match itself with Naomi and Tiffany Stratton, were you surprised that Naomi got the win?
No, because it feels like it's always been their MO. And I know that, the regime has changed, but it always feels like that the Money in the Bank winner loses a lot before they cash in. And so I could see where,
especially if they're going to be turning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I could see where that's it's a nice win for Naomi, who needs it after not being able to beat Bailey a couple weeks ago. And then it's just one of those things where it's all part of the process of turning Tiffany into the hopefully the super babyface.
Then there was a 20-minute ladder match to close things out. We started our post show talking about it, praising it as a felt like a big time main event, even if the take team division doesn't always feel top tier, although tomorrow night it will.
Yeah.
Talk about how Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa came across, and talk about the reactions for the Street Profits compared to DIY. Could you gauge who the crowd was more into between those two acts?
The audience definitely wanted title change. They liked DIY. They loved the Street Profits.
Okay. Yep.
They were really into all the stuff that Montez and Dawkins were doing. And then at the very end, when it looked like that Dawkins was going to climb up and grab the titles, again, my section came alive for that. And then huge boos for the Bloodline for Tama and Tonga when they were able to win the whole thing. And I don't know when SmackDown went off the air, but Solo and Jacob came out. Was that a part of it? Did you guys?
That was
the
very end. The very end, we saw him walk out, but nothing after that. So I was going to ask you, what kind of celebration was there? Did anything happen?
It wasn't huge, but it was, as soon as Solo came out, man, again, it was one of those just huge boos from the audience. And they took their time in the aisleway, gloating and celebrating and laughing at DIY and the Street Profits. And, Solo really came across like a big time bad guy, which was nice to see, because you kind of wonder about that with him.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought, by the way, tonight, and Tej, talk about this. I thought the second I saw him in the aisle on TV, I was like, did he change his look? Are they, like, something felt more street tough, sinister, less kind of cosplay? I don't know. There's been something about Solo that isn't quite working in terms of him seeming threatening. And I thought there was a difference in his presentation tonight. Did you notice that, Tash?
I did. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was, but it feels like they've kind of ironed out having just enough of a different dynamic between Solo and Jacob that Solo doesn't feel like Jacob Light anymore. Yeah. And, there were little touches in the past, like, couple of months of, Solo's coat being, like, really ill-fitting that were supposed to signify he's not the leader that Roman Reigns was, but it just kind of made him feel a little unintimidating. Yeah. So I feel like toning down on that and really just kind of
a bad counterfeit, not a good counterfeit.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like, they've kind of refined his presentation to the point where, he's still a subpar leader, but he's still a presence in his own right, which has done wonders for, the Bloodline's aura overall.
And Derek, did Solo seem more intimidating than you were kind of anticipating?
I wouldn't say intimidating. I would say he looked more confident.
Okay.
Than I've noticed.
That goes a long
him.
way.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, Jacob Fatu is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, Solo. It really feels like that going into this, and maybe it's because he's getting to work with Roman this weekend. But I don't know. He had a he had the aura, as the kids say, right? He had that about him tonight, and it was something that I hadn't seen in a while.
Tej, anything else you want to ask Derek? And chat room, it's open to you too if you guys have any specific questions that you want us to throw Derek's way.
So, Derek, this is the first time you and I are speaking to each other. What is your history in terms of attending WWE live events?
Oh, I was going to ask too, like, how did this crowd compare if you've been to the Nashville building before to other times you attended? It seemed like the product's more over. Were there more or fewer fans?
This was the biggest Smackdown crowd I've seen probably ever. And I've been trying to attend. I attend as many live events as I possibly can through the year. So I was at that Blood and Guts show that you were talking about earlier. I got to be at that, and like I said, I tried to go as much as possible. And this was the biggest crowd I've seen for a WWE show in Nashville, maybe since '98, like with Raw. So yeah, it was outside like SummerSlam or something like that, like just in Bridgestone. It was the biggest crowd I've seen in a long time. Very into the product. They stayed hot pretty much all night with the dark matches. You know, they weren't as invested towards the end, but then, like I said, when Cody came out, man, it's like Hulk Hogan came out. I mean, it's really the only way I could compare it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was great, and I texted a friend of mine and said I've never seen the third tier as full as it was tonight. So yeah, they're doing great, and it's crazy with the way that the ticket prices are. You wouldn't expect so many people to be there, but it's business is great right now. So
yeah, I mean, if you can get it and you're a business, you take it.
Exactly.
We had an article on PWTorch.com the day W Announcer TV deal. That was coincidental. We weren't trying to be a wet blanket, but somebody wrote and said they priced me and me out of the market from taking my sons. We like to he talked about the prices going up the last few years for AEW shows, and the close-up seats are exorbitantly more expensive, and then it's even more expensive further back. And WWE can get away with it because, like you said, third tier, full to the back, at least from the camera angles we saw and from your perspective. So. But those have to come down, or they're going to be sensitive to it. If they can be so much more sophisticated than they used to be. I mean, territories. It's like $5, $10, $12. That was it. It just just they didn't think much about it, and then now they have all kinds of abilities to run the metrics through AI practically to figure out how to maximize to the penny how much they're going to charge people. So. We'll see how long it lasts, but it's not fan friendly, it's not wallet friendly, but people are paying for it. And I tell you what, if you just paying more money but being part of an atmosphere like you were part of, Derek, tonight is it's so much more enjoyable to be at a show where the product is over and the seats are full to the last row. I mean, it almost like doubles the enjoyment compared to being in a kind of a half, 1/3 filled building and the crowd not into the product. It's like, even if you are, it takes you out of it.
Yeah, it's sometimes you go to these shows and it's tough to be a part of it because you're like, man, I could have stayed at home and had a better time than what I'm doing right now. But tonight was great. Obviously the match card was really good. Lots of different things, but the audience was into it from start to finish. So obviously, like you said, Wade, that makes it even that much more enjoyable.
Derek, anything else you want to add? Anything happened in commercial breaks or reactions to big screen stuff? I don't know. Fan signs. Anything else you want to share from being there in person?
There was a humorous moment where Cody acknowledged that a fan put a sign up that said, "Cody, I named my cat after you." and that got a big laugh from everybody. The biggest thing was no one knew whether or not the AJ thing was real. So I thought that they did a phenomenal, no pun intended. I thought they did a phenomenal job with that because people behind me were like, "Hey, is that fake? What's going on?"
Yeah.
And so if you can do that, especially nowadays, man, it's a really cool thing. But no, I had a great time. This was a great show, and again, man, thanks for having me on. This is really cool.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Derek. Call anytime. And if you go to Nashville again, for sure, let us know if you're willing to be on-site correspondent. Thanks, Derek.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet. So, Tej, we didn't talk a lot about AJ except with Derek. So I'm kind of curious just your thoughts on what they did with him, how they pivoted from, the fake retirement and everything they did with Cody, and then it's time away. He comes back. And now they just build up sympathy with, I assume, a worked angle. Sean still thinks it was a shoot. I don't know either way yet. I reached out to a couple people during the show. I haven't heard back. So, yeah, just your thoughts on AJ's place and what tonight told you about what you think they're doing with him. And I guess to answer my own question, he's in the mix with U.S. title people.
I mean, I feel like I have a lot more patience for the sort of hard reset character babyface turn than a lot of people do. At the end of the day, I feel like it comes to the territory. When you have a heel as despicable as AJ and you don't have the programming time to really flesh out a babyface turn, sometimes the best way is, all right, take him off TV, and then when he comes back, put him in front of a crowd is going to cheer for him, play up the real life love that people have for AJ Styles, and just go with it from there. That's what they did. It was predictable, it was safe, but it got the job done. I think that putting him in the U.S. title mix feels like a little bit of a step down following, just how long he was fighting for a world title and, just how much of the AJ Styles character since 2023 when he lost out on the chance to team against the Bloodline and, get a solo shot against Roman Reigns has been about getting the gold one last time before he hangs it up. It feels like an odd choice, but I'm choosing to believe it's him kind of treading water until they can really give him one last little main event push before he inevitably slows down in whatever form that may take.
Yeah. All right, let's is there anything else from SmackDown you want to bring up that I haven't? Anything in your notes?
Yeah, one quick thing. The backstage little moment where all the heels are or maybe there were a few baby faces in there complaining about Chelsea's stink. Well, Austin Theory was holding a cake. Was that ever explained?
No.
Yeah, did anyone in the chat? Did you guys know? What was that? Why did he have a chocolate cake?
Yeah, he's like, even my cake stinks. And it's like, no, that's Chelsea. And it was a joke. But yeah, I don't know whose birthday it was or what. So I'll keep an eye on the chat. Speaking of which, a couple just things I'll point out as we wrap up here that people mentioned regarding crowds at WWE. Mother Lover 2019 says it's honestly really interesting how passionate AEW fans are online. But when you watch the shows, WWE crowds have so much more engagement and passion in the product. In the product, stories, and characters. So, and then Mark Biscotti said earlier, Wade, you perfectly described, and this was earlier in the show, why I can't get into most AEW matches. They look like people setting up spots, not athletes trying to be the best and win. AEW, it's very polarized environment. I've said I enjoy AEW and WWE shows relatively equally. And just kind of week to week. I don't have a favorite promotion. Part of my job, thankfully, is watching something I enjoy watching. And I look forward to watching Raw and SmackDown and Dynamite, pretty equally on average and over any given span of time. But people who like one a lot more than the other dig their heels in. They very much let you know. I'm not in the Reddit social media realm to experience it much, sort of thankfully. But I know it's out there. And one of the things that AEW fans think is, WWE style, it's so boring, it's so formula. And then, we hear from Mark, he's like, well, yeah, but AEW matches just look like a bunch of people doing athletic spots, and it takes me out of it. It doesn't feel, different people have different styles they like, and I appreciate all of it. But Tej, what do you think about what Mark says? Is that a good argument for those? Does it explain to AEW fans why some people like WWE matches better?
I think, honestly, it explains to fans of both promotions that there really is no one way to skin a cat when it comes to professional wrestling. Like I said, I got back into wrestling watching Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. A lot of that DNA made its way into AEW. So I love watching AEW. I love WWE as well, but I don't enjoy them in the exact same way. They hit different parts of my brain. One is definitely tends to be a little slower, a little more deliberate. There's a lot more pauses for big moments. The other one with AEW, it just moves at a different like quicker
Right.
rhythm, and
Yeah.
that leads to a different kind of investment from the fans. And there's not as many kind of like pauses and beats that you can really kind of sink your teeth into and let the cheers culminate. But again,
Yeah.
it's just, what do you pride from your wrestling experience? I don't think one is inherently better than the other, but I do think that it's very easy to have a preference for one over the other. But I respect both sides.
One of them allows you to have fewer injuries and have longer career if you're a wrestler. I mean, there is, the argument of efficiency, making, every move you do and every bump you take and every chance you take count for as much as it can. And that's the, more objective, I would argue, defensive WWE style is just, wrestlers don't burn out and don't get as injured and as banged up. So if you can get away with it and still get a good crowd reaction, to me, there's AEW matches can be a lot more exciting. And there are times WWE, it sort of feels like, you can sort of know what's going to happen before it happens. And there's, less range of good and bad within that. But with AEW, there are times where you just sort of get numb to moves mattering because people just no-sell so many of them. But WWE's guilty of that sometimes too. So, I mean, they all just kind of, the strengths and weaknesses are in both companies. There's an overlap. It's a bit of a Venn diagram. It's not a completely separate style. But AEW definitely prides themselves and I think tries to differentiate themselves and has a roster that's eager to just produce, like you say, less pause, more bang, 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 go, go, go. And I think that's when we look at Paul Levesque's wrestling style, and then we look at Tony Khan's fandom and what he pops for. I mean, the promotions are a manifestation right now of the personalities running them. We were talking earlier about Bianca. Sadler version 3 said, Bianca's similar to Jey Uso for me. I wish she was more serious, but she gets a big reaction every time she appears, so it's hard for me to complain too much. It's sort of like AEW's TV deal. Like, you can celebrate it. It's great. Well, it's really good. I don't want to say the nuance of what is it great or not. We need to know more details, or it's a subjective term. It's great for AEW that they got the deal. I sort of felt it was inevitable they were going to get another TV deal and it was going to be, in the realm of this good. So I wasn't someone doubting that they would get this and be profitable. That's clearly the lay of the land right now in the industry. This company is producing demos and, weekly television year round. It's valuable to a cable network and they had a good relationship. So I wasn't surprised this deal happened, but I was bracing myself for the possibility, something might fall through because it took, it seemed to take longer to get to it, but it seems like they saved it for the 5th anniversary. But my point in this, if I can remember now, is that the idea of, no, I literally forgot my point. Let me think for a sec. The reaction that they got for the TV deal. Now I did lose my point. It'll come back to me. So I'm going to throw back to you, Tej, Jey Uso, and the way that he cuts promos, it gets over. Now I know what I was going to say. I knew it would come to me. When he says, when Sadler version 3, I should say, says, Bianca's over, so who am I to complain? Well, how much more over could she be if she felt a little more grounded and picked her spots to be affected? And that's what I say about the AEW TV deal. This is not some vindication that AEW never made any mistake and every critique of them was wrong. It just says they didn't make enough mistakes to screw up bad enough to not end up with this good deal. It's somewhere in between those two extremes. Like they could have had a better deal had they made fewer mistakes, I would argue. I think they could have better ratings and more viewers, and they would have been able to demand a bigger deal if they did some of the things that a lot of people have expressed as a reason that they've been driven away from being as loyal to them and as passionate about the brand. I would apply that same argument to Bianca. I think she could be a much bigger star if I felt like I was ever meeting the person at any aspect of the person that we see on who just lives her life 7 days a week. And everything feels like an elevated, kind of gimmicky, cartoonish version that Vince McMahon told her to portray, and she's never broken out of it. So that was my AWTV analogy. Like, there's good, it's working, they're profitable, she gets pops, but how much better could it be? And it could be better if some things were different. So, Tej, go ahead.
I completely agree. And just going off of what Sadler said right there. Oh, you put it right back on the screen. Thank you. Look at that synergy.
Yes.
Like, Jey Uso for me was in a very similar boat to Bianca. Like, the Uso shtick, for lack of a better term, was always over the Uso Penitentiary. But what got Jey to that next level was during the Bloodline arc when he was allowed to be vulnerable. He could calm down. He could be real with Sammy in backstage segments. One of the most affecting little backstage moments I've ever seen throughout my history watching wrestling was, I believe it was right before the segment where Jay turned on Roman, left the Bloodline altogether with Jimmy. It was him walking to the ring. He passes by Sami Zayn. The two just look at each other, don't say a word, and then Jay keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, it allowed Jay to be a real character with real flaws. And I think moments like that is what really catapulted him from, a main event guy to a guy who could be the guy and who feels like a main character. I think Bianca needs just a little bit more of that.
And I talked about companies tailoring how people are featured in promos to their strengths and hiding their weaknesses. Jay's the guy. He's a man of the fans. He's a wrestler of the people. And so he's in the concourse. He's in the stands cutting promos. He feeds off that energy, and the energy buoys his weakness on the microphone of having kind of nuanced, more layered delivery of his promos. And then, when he cuts an in-ring promo, his IC title celebration was one of his better promos, but it's still not top tier. It's just the energy in the building elevates what he's doing. And there's a sense of camaraderie that the fans have with him in his journey. And what you described, good acting, really well plotted and executed, nuanced segments with the Bloodline that made people connect to him emotionally for a long period of time. That's now paying off because they're like, we got Jay extracted from that situation. We could tell it was going to be better for him. We're rooting for him to make that decision. It's in a miniature way what they're doing with Tiffany and Nia. And then that carries over when the fans finally get what they want. Other things have to be present. It doesn't work for everybody. We'll see how it works for Austin Theory when he splits from Grayson. We could list, as Todd Martin said on the Fix this week, like maybe 12 other examples of slow dissolving partnerships and tag teams. And it's too many, but still, some of them are going to work. And yeah, with Bianca, it'd be nice to see her sink her teeth into something and be given the challenge of something that has more layering to it. I mentioned earlier the Bitchometer and Bailey resetting it. Jared Lynch did mention at the time in the chat. To be fair, as far as I can remember, the Bitchometer hasn't been reset recently on WWE programming or for a while. And that is true. It does seem like there's been less of that. So it had a little more punch to it because 3 other people hadn't said it on this show and 6 people didn't say it on Raw, and it wasn't said 3 times last week on SmackDown. So that's my point. Not to never say it, but it shouldn't feel people say it like they're getting away with something, and when everyone's saying it, it doesn't feel like you're getting away with anything. It feels like a crutch everyone's leaning on. And then finally, Ashley M says, Wade, I enjoyed you on 83 Weeks. That's Conrad Thompson show that he does with Eric Bischoff. I was on that last week talking about episode 3 of the Vince McMahon documentary. And Ashley says it'd be cool if you and Eric did another show, in my opinion. Yeah, I think we probably will. Eric was very complimentary of how the show went and was pretty clear he wanted to do more. So yeah, we'll see if it works out when a topic comes up. And I'm invited. I had a good time. I enjoyed the format. So people haven't checked it out.
I don't know if it's just me, Wade, but your sound cut out.
Oh, I can hear you.
That just me?
It might just be you. It might be your Bluetooth. I don't know. Let me see if the chat says anything as far as that goes. Chat, can you hear me?
You're back.
I'm back.
Yeah,
okay,
you're back.
good. Yep. So yeah, actually, I think I'll probably do another show with them. So check that out. It's on ad-free shows on Patreon. I think you could probably, don't know how exactly it works, but I think you can get a free sample and hear that. So everyone says they can hear me, so that's good.
Gotcha.
And Sean says Eric has always given me praise. I've been around Eric where he hasn't praised me. There's been times Eric hasn't praised. We both started wrestling at the same time and cross paths a lot over the years. But it's when I see him, there's just there's such history there, and we haven't had any falling out that was irreparable. So cool. Here's Mother Lover 2019. I personally have felt Bianca has felt very genuine and grounded since Triple H took over her booking. Okay. Yeah, I still tonight backstage, I just was like, I don't believe she talks like that when the camera's not on. That's my issue. I want to see her just again, I have no problem with her going into that mode. In Tej, you said that, there's sometimes something triggers you, you're on. It's understandable. I'm not saying it's not part of who she is, but I just don't think when she's backstage chatting with Naomi and Jade, that's the mode she's always going to be in. And I think I want to expand her character, not eliminate this aspect of her character, but just expand and see other realms of her behavior. And then Mother
100%.
Lover says, I can see what you mean about Bianca there. So yay, kumbaya. Tej, thank you so much. You were great.
Thank you guys for having me. And, you know, to anyone listening or watching, thank you guys for accepting me into the world of PWTorch.
Very good. Check out your SmackDown Feud Tracker column. It's up right now, PWTorch.com in the opinion section. And we'll look forward to next week's, and we'll circle back and do this again. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. By the way, didn't plug this yet.
Absolutely.
Didn't plug this yet, but we would appreciate if you made it this far and you like what we do. One way you can show support for us and get a lot in return is a VIP membership. PWTorch.com/GoVIP gives you full details. Over 35 years of archives of podcasts and newsletters, hundreds of retro radio shows from the 90s. It's just rabbit hole after rabbit hole to go down. It's contemporaneous coverage of pro wrestling and the style you hear on this show. And we'd love to have you as a member and supporting us financially. We depend on that. And so I think, you know, we're a small business. We're not some big corporation gouging you. We give you a lot in return. And so, yeah, if you like what we do, support us. And like I said, you get a lot in return. Ad-free versions of these shows, a super friendly podcast feed where you can customize it with different groupings of shows, individual shows. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts. If you're big in the Spotify ecosystem, you can sign up through Spotify using Patreon. Just search PWTorch VIP while you're in Spotify. It'll bring up Patreon membership. That gives you access to all our VIP podcasts and different tiers of pricing. So that's another route to go. You can go to patreon.com/PWTorchVIP and get a 7-day free trial to see what all the VIP podcasts are all about. But the full VIP membership, including our archive access going back to the late 1980s, full details on that at PWTorch.com/GoVIP. And again, that's a single click to get Apple Podcast access, and single click also, once you sign up, you get an email to log in on just about any iOS or Android podcast app also. But you also get an ad-free version of our website and so much more. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we will talk to you all next time.